With that, I'll turn it over to John Ballanch, Program Co-Chair, ESG Analyst with Boston Trust Walden, to introduce today's program. Thank you.
Do this real quick. Sorry, John. I forgot one very important thank you. I forgot to mention that this forum is a partnership between the EBC and the UMass Boston Sustainable Solutions Lab. And I wanted to point out Gabriela Bocio Santos in the back there and thank her for all her work on the forum organizing committee. Now you can have the mic.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. Hi. Thanks to everyone here in Seaport with us and to everyone online. So stoked for today's climate resilience and community engagement discussion. I also just want to reiterate all the thanks that we've had for my fellow co-chairs, Carolyn and Julie, to the EBC, to the Sustainable Solutions Lab, Foley Hoag, and everyone here that's made this event possible. Thank you all so much. So as you've already heard, my name is John Ballanch. I'm a co-chair on today's event and on the steering committee of the Climate Adaptation Forum. And I work at Boston Trust Walden, as you've already heard, which is a fully integrated investment management firm. And I conduct ESG, or environment, social governance analysis, to integrate considerations for investment with sustainability, environment, and long-term benefit to shareholders and to people and planet. But why am I here today? Well, I grew up in the small but mighty community of Chelsea, Massachusetts, predominantly Latinx community, a very proud immigrant community. And from the age of 15, thanks to an organization called Green Roots, I joined the movement for environmental justice. Now, you might be asking, what could have involved a teenager at 15 to pull away from my incredibly important life to begin organizing in environmental justice? Well, one, there was a diesel power plant that somebody thought would be a good idea to put next to one of our elementary schools. But two, it was community engagement. It was the community engagement and organizing of Green Roots that helped root me deeper into my community, to understand the value of my community to its people and to what we were doing. And so I am infinitely grateful for that. And stand here in part today because of community engagement. Today, I looked at the registration list. We're a room full of organizers, attorneys, climate specialists, scientists and resilience specialists, engineers, finance bros, public officials, and more. So what unites us? We're all here because we're committed to promoting sustainable, climate resilient futures. No matter who you are or where you're from, we're here to learn more about community engagement, to share what we know, and to ultimately be better stewards of this earth and our communities. When Julie, Carolyn, Kelly, and I began planning for this event, we knew it really needed to reflect a real need in our larger community. And so with the deluge of funding we've seen entering our communities in recent years, and with a growing awareness of the need for meaningful community involvement, community engagement has become a central element of grant applications, due diligence, and reporting on our project impact. So the truth is that whatever our technical training might be, sustainable solutions to our climate challenges must be informed by, and ideally led by, the communities for whom these projects are intended to benefit. Conducting community engagement inclusively and effectively honors the humanity, power, and brilliance of our community members. And as you'll hear from our speakers today, I hope you keep this connection between sustainability and authentic community engagement together. My co-chairs and I asked our speakers today to talk about engagement as they see it, and I'm so thrilled for you to hear their stories. As organizers, public administrators, policy experts, and planners, and all-around agents of change, you'll hear about the importance of inclusion, partnerships, planning, and community building from Portland, Oregon to Chelsea, Massachusetts. Now, two key framing points before I turn it over to my co-chair, Julie. At least two of our speakers will touch on the subject of working with vulnerable populations today. I understand that this might be sensitive material for some, but I also want to call to mind the notion of the miner's canary when we think about the climate crisis. That is to say that those most vulnerable are unhoused, are newly arrived immigrants, the undocumented, the elderly, and so on. And the way that we as a society respond to those people's needs first ultimately bears great weight on how we manage crisis writ large. So I ask you to embrace this as we work through today's panel discussions and our negotiations exercise. Second, speaking about the negotiation exercise, Carri Hulet has graciously agreed to lead a fantastic negotiations exercise today using the International Association for Public Participation's Spectrum of Public Participation tool. As you'll hear more about today, community engagement exists on a spectrum, ranging from neglect or non-involvement all the way to full, robust empowerment and co-designed and co-led solutions. What won't be surprising to you is that increased community engagement will always lead to more sustainable, more impactful outcomes. Without further ado, I want to thank you all for being here and turn it over to Julie Wormser to introduce our incredible speakers. Thank you.
Boy, thank God for glasses. It's not a coincidence that I have come to nearly every Climate Adaptation Forum since it was created, and I'm now Cambridge's Chief Climate Officer. This has been a 6-year graduate level practicum for all of us. And I also think it's not a coincidence that Boston hasn't experienced a backlash against the planning and investments we're making, even though we haven't had a big disaster. So first of all, I just really want to thank the folks who started this and continue this forum for moving us all along together. The people who are presenting today are two-a-person miracles. They do their work with integrity, strength, public purpose, and brilliance. We are very lucky to have them, and I know you will enjoy the morning. You can read their longer bios on the program, but I just want to give you a taste of why we're so delighted to have them here. By the end of their presentations, I know you will get a sense of why I'm such a giant fan of both Chelsea City Manager Fidel Maltez and Green Root's Climate Justice Manager Bianca Bowman. Each has perfected the art of getting meaningful things done with grace, kindness, collaboration, and creativity. They are each strong relational leaders. They create power through coalitions, not by rolling people. And each is a current leader of a decades-long partnership between the city and its key environmental justice nonprofit that allows them to mobilize financial and community support for the benefit of residents who most need those public investments. Fidel and Bianca.
Good morning, buenos dias. Bianca's, oh, we got two mics. That's smart. I'll get started. Thank you for having me today. So the title of our presentation was intentional in that, you know, we're striving, right? We're not there yet, and it's a never going conversation, right? Of how do we make it better? I truly believe what everyone has said, but for me, it's a little personal. Those that know me know that I'm married to Maria Belen Power, who is the Undersecretary of Environmental Justice for the Commonwealth. Before that, though, she spent 11 years organizing in Chelsea, first on labor issues and then on environmental justice issues. So these conversations were conversations that we were having on a nightly basis at home, right? And me as a government worker and her as an organizer, it's a never evolving balance, right? Of prioritizing the needs of our community while also building stuff at the same time. I'm an engineer, and my wife is an organizer, and that has been quite a marriage, and it's something that we try to implement into practice. Sorry, you're right, the cameras. So what we're going to talk about tonight or this morning is this journey of engagement and how we continue to work on it and why we're so passionate about it. Bianca? Could you tell us about Chelsea?
Yeah, I can absolutely talk about Chelsea. So hi, I'm Bianca. Thank you, Fidel, for starting this out. We are representing our small but mighty community, as John mentioned. We're only about 2 square miles, and we have 40,000 residents. That's probably quite a underestimate due to our high undocumented population. And we have about 70% linguistic or ethnic minorities, meaning majority of folks in Chelsea speak a language other than English. So most people are speaking Spanish, but we also have represented Arabic, Chinese, Haitian Creole, a huge range, which is incredible. And a large percent of our population are not salaried workers. Most of our population are, working 2 or 3 jobs. It's a highly dense population that it's really hard to just explain this in words, but walking through Chelsea, you dropping flyers or door knocking. I door knock on 1 building and I need to drop maybe 12 flyers if I was going to give every single person a flyer. So incredibly dense, but kind of a magical place because there's a really deep sense of community. And I'm not from Chelsea. I'm originally from the DC area, but I've completely fallen in love with our community and how much we support each other. And I also have worked at Green Roots ever since I've lived in the Boston area. And Green Roots is an environmental justice nonprofit. So we've been working on pretty much everything under the umbrella of environmental justice, which for us means things like health equity, climate justice and resilience, as well as transit access. So we kind of have a pretty expansive definition of what environmental justice means. And in order to get anything done, we have to have a deep partnership with the city of Chelsea. So if you want to head to the next slide. Perfect. So Fidel, when you and I were discussing this presentation, you talked a little bit about people in Chelsea and how something that's important to get across to people to also help people understand why it's so important to focus incredibly locally, hyper locally, even neighborhood by neighborhood, and certainly focus on the culture of a small community is thinking about trust and what trust really means. And you mentioned that folks weren't going to trust someone in a uniform to help them. So, and you mentioned people like police or the National Guard. Can you expand on that a little bit and talk about why we worry about trust from the community in our work?
Absolutely. And it's something that translates climate, but I just wanted to share one story, which is at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of our residents were facing a lot of hunger, a lot of food insecurity, and we had a long discussion of how to help. And our city manager at the time reached out to the governor, and the governor offered up resources in the form of the National Guard, and we had a lot of discussions about men and women in military fatigues entering our community, right? Because I'm from Nicaragua. I grew up in the '80s. Someone in military fatigue is not someone that helps, right? It's not someone that is coming to provide support or save the day. It is usually someone who is coming to enforce, to cause damage, right? I personally have an inherent lack of trust for anyone in a military fatigue. Obviously, that has evolved over the years, but we're very mindful of how government in Nicaragua is very different than government here in Chelsea, Massachusetts. But it is not an on and off switch. It is not something that I forgot about when I entered the United States, and in many ways, it's not something that our residents forget about. So we talked about partnering those resources with local faces that could almost shield, if you will, right, or almost provide an emotional transition for our residents. That same thing applies to our police department, right? In low-income communities, the police department is not seen in the same way as they are in Reading, Massachusetts, right? If you're locked out of your house, you call the police department and they come with a smile. Typically, in communities like Chelsea, the police come for different reasons, right? So it's something that we have talked a lot about. That I'm not able to do my job as a city official with this uniform that I have on, right? And having someone that looks, talks, and acts like Bianca or Bianca's team just makes our job so much easier.
Yeah, thank you. And so that's the perfect setup of when we're talking about having effective climate resilience planning. For us, what makes any project effective is, and any community engagement effective, is having trust so that people can truly tell us what their actual needs are and what their actual experience is. Because if you don't trust someone that comes up to you and asks you a question, you're not going to give them a real answer or really be able to talk to them in any depth about their experience. So that is something that we really consider. And so with the COVID example, my understanding of that experience was that instead of bringing in the National Guard, there was a roundtable of community-based organizations in Chelsea to address this specific issue. And so we look at that as a really prime example of what climate resilience needs to look like on our end. And we need to bring in folks that already have a deep relationship with different neighborhoods, with different communities of people within Chelsea, so that we can understand what they're going to need in a crisis, in a climate crisis, or in just the day-to-day changes that we're experiencing, like extreme heat and more flooding. So we do our community engagement and the type of community engagement we do in order to build trust and continue having trust and relationships so that we can be effective. And I'm just consulting my notes to see.
I'd like to ask you a question, Bianca.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm an engineer. Right?
Oh, yeah, I've heard
I have
that.
all the answers, right? And lawyers definitely have all the answers, right? Definitely have all the answers. But Julie is a very well-trained climate specialist. So you have all the answers, right, Julie? Right. But I'm kidding, but in many ways, many of us in this room, right, and many of us in City Hall approach our work in this way, right? That you know, I'm in my position. I am very well trained. I have all the answers, but it's not true, right? And I think we all agree that it's not true. So why is it so important to include our community in finding those answers? Bianca.
That's such a great question. I almost forgot you were going to ask it. So, yeah, I think that that's something that is not traditionally kept in mind when doing any kind of large-scale project, when doing any kind of urban planning, park planning, certainly climate resilience planning, we go to scientists for that. But if you're planning a climate resilience, heat mitigation focused park in a community, and you take all these experts together, they can probably source crazy amounts of solutions and knowledge from years of experience that they have, but they don't know what it's like to walk to this park or walk to this space or bring their family to that space. And they don't know what it's like when it's super rainy out or super hot out. There's just a certain level of expertise that comes from living in a community when you're doing this kind of community planning that no one can give other than residents. So for us, I think that's why we consider community engagement the top priority in projects from our perspective, because without that expertise, you cannot have an effective space or climate plan or park. Because if you build a park for a bunch of really young kids, but the entire neighborhood is teenagers and seniors, no one's going to use that space, regardless of if it has every new fancy climate solution that are used in parks across the country. So thank you for that question. So how do we talked about the why for why we focus so hard on community engagement, but now we want to talk a little bit about what it looks like in Chelsea. So I'm going to start with an example that we like to call the cool block. I've worked with a lot of people in here, so apologies because you've all heard about this before. Everyone that we have had the pleasure of working with. But so this middle picture is from the cool block. It's from an empty lot that wasn't utilized for over 10 years at all by the community. And this is in an area that we know is hotter than most of the rest of the city of Chelsea. So the city of Chelsea in itself is a heat island, but within that, we used hyper local heat data through both satellite images and through sensors placed throughout the city of Chelsea to understand the level of heat. And that was through, again, a collaboration between Green Roots and the Boston University School of Public Health that we've been working on for years. So once we knew this information and we wanted to begin piloting heat mitigation solutions, we said, all right, well, we want to try a bunch of different stuff, but we're a nonprofit organization. We don't own any of this land. We needed to work with the city in order to do anything. So from our perspective, it's super important to have a relationship with the city and collaborate with the city in order for us to be effective and get anything done. So the cool block is kind of a great example of this. When we were looking for heat mitigation solutions to implement, we had to bring in folks like the DPW and the city manager and anyone else who would sit at the table with us at the city to talk about what we were going to do. So we planted a whole bunch of trees, street trees, in collaboration with volunteers from Green Roots and the city DPW. We have also placed sensors around the cool block to be monitoring whether all of these implemented solutions are actually working. And then we also have worked on transforming this empty lot into a park space. The city eventually, after a lot of organizing and talks and planning, got ownership of this lot that was previously privately owned. And then we've been in constant collaboration for the last couple of years planning this green space that's going to focus on heat mitigation. And every single one of those calls that I'm still on for this lot, folks are asking us questions like, what do community members, we're going to put this splash pad, what do community members think? And, we have to be like, give me a sec. I'm going to go back, text this picture to like the 50 people that I know on this street, and then I'm going to see what they think. But this park is probably going to be one of the most effective and useful heat mitigating solutions because of that deep collaboration.
And what you're hearing is a theme, right? It's not only good policy, but it results in a better product, right? So I want to talk about an example that is dear to my heart, and it's lead pipes, right? So as Commissioner of Public Works and an engineer, I love pipes, right? It's love pipes, not lead in particular, but pipes in general. And replacing lead pipes is easy, right? It's a contractor. You dig a hole, you replace it. It's not hard work. What's really hard is identifying those lead pipes, and being led into those homes that lead pipes is in, right? So I should have told you earlier about men in military fatigues. Now imagine an inspector showing up to your house, right, in the city of Chelsea, and being asked to, hey, let me inspect your pipe. Even in my house, anytime somebody knocks on my door, it's a hard no. It's what are you selling? What do you want me to do? Right, and we're well off in my household. In the homes that we have in Chelsea, is usually homes that have overcrowding, homes that when they see an inspector is usually a bad thing. So we were really, really struggling identifying lead pipes. Identifying in lead pipes. So I talked to my wife and I said, can Green Roots help us with door knocking, right? Can Green Roots help us in doing outreach, in hiring ambassadors, which this was in 2018, right? Before ambassadors were sexy. So it happened, and essentially what we did is we canvassed an entire neighborhood we didn't start in the night section of Chelsea. We started in the low income section of Chelsea, and Green Roots was magically able to enter every one of those basements and got us a list, right? That we could then execute and do what we do best, which is dig a hole, patch a trench, and let it sit there for 2 years until we can pave it again. And again, it's not because we were checking off a box. It is not because we like Green Roots. It made my life easier as Commissioner of Public Works, and that's really what the message that we want to leave you with, right? This is not about you should be doing this because it's good. It's going to result in a better project. But I wanted to ask you one last question, Bianca. I heard that Green Roots is celebrating your 30th anniversary.
You are.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. Why is it so important for the city to partner with such a long-standing organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that one thing that you and I talked about when we were planning this as well is that you haven't been the city manager the whole time, but we already have this deep relationship. Granted, yes, Maria Belén is your wife, but even if that hadn't been the case, Green Roots' relationship with the city is established and has lasted through turnover and changes on both staff's side. And that's because we know that without each other, without this collaboration, we can't get anything done to the level that we really, really need to. And that's kind of what we wanted to provide as our final takeaway, is that in order for us to be effective in the work that we do, as Fidel said, it's not just because it's good. It is good and it's the right thing to do, if you ask me. But it's also that we can't get grant funding without each other to the level that we've been able to. And we can't actually use that grant funding without collaborating. So there's no point in getting a grant if you don't have the people on the ground to actually make the work happen. And another really important thing that I wanted to get across is that, both government and nonprofit are usually under-resourced organizations. And so having that collaboration and that conversation in place so consistently over 30 years at this point also makes sure that people are compensated to a level that they can actually get the work done. This is something that is important to us and also is important to the city, because people is what for us makes the work happen. And people take money to hire them and actually provide for food on their tables. And so, to kind of leave you with a final takeaway, in order for us to be effective, we have to continue this partnership. And we have this partnership because of a continued effort from the city to acknowledge that to Green Roots, to our organization. And it's a mutual respect that has been built over many years, and trust. So trust between the organizations also allows for us to have trust from the community.
Absolutely. And as you heard, it's not we don't plan a park and issue a contract for engagement, right? It's not how it works. We have been having this conversation for 30 years, right? And I'll tell you, if I'd come in and I called Green Roots and I would have said, I'm not working with you anymore, John. I would have been very quickly ushered out of my job, right? Because these organizations are so embedded into our community, into who they are, into who we are as a community, that it holds me accountable in a good way, and at times bad, but in a way that makes my job easier, because I don't have to figure out who's the power holder, who can help me navigate a thorny issue. It is a round table. It's a cabinet. It's an idea of we will develop this together.
And one final thought is just, as Fidel mentioned, we may not always be on the same page, but we both trust that we're coming from the same place and intention. And when things come up where we know it happens, you are excited about a project or you need to make a project happen and community engagement was an afterthought. That's a lesson to learn and just something that I would encourage everyone to think about. Takeaways, that's something that we have found to be most effective in our collaboration with the city and in collaboration with anyone is if you do want community perspective on any kind of project, that has to be first. It has to be the first thought. It has to be the first part of a project. Otherwise, if you already have a project planned, what are community members advising on? So yeah, I think that that's something that we both have experienced. We both have luckily become definitely on the same page over the past 30 years. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so just imagine if democracy in the United States acted like that all the time. Like what a country we would live in, right? I mean, it's very bittersweet, but I'm glad it works here. So I'm very lucky to have lived most of my adult life in the city of Cambridge, starting when my rent was $200 a month. Back in the rent control days, which allowed me to be a nonprofit person. One of the things that makes me feel most connected to the city of Cambridge, beyond the funds they give out for block parties and the emails from the city and the public library on free upcoming events, is the participatory budgeting process. And the city sets aside about $1 million a year for residents of all ages, including the little ones, to propose projects that improve our city, ranging from youth center upgrades, laundry facilities in public schools, to public toilets and pocket parks. As we speak, Cambridge has started its 11th round of funding, and we are delighted to have Melissa Liu, Cambridge's Participatory Budgeting and Engagement Coordinator, with us today. She will describe the comprehensive process Cambridge goes through to request ideas, screen them for viability, and send them back out for community-wide voting. Thank you for all your work, Melissa. Where are you?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Julie, for the amazing welcome. As she mentioned, my name is Melissa Liu. I am the Participatory Budgeting and Engagement Coordinator working out of the City of Cambridge Budget Office. And I was invited here today to talk about participatory budgeting. It's a bit of a mouthful, so I'll refer to it as PB moving forward. But PB, which is one of Cambridge's approaches to community-led decision-making and a very important aspect of the city's community engagement practices in general. So before I jump into the details of how PB works in Cambridge and how we make this happen, just a few facts about Cambridge. You may know it's just across the river. It is just over 6 square miles. It's a pretty densely populated city with a population of roughly 118,000 people. It is a very diverse community and home to 2 of the largest universities or most well-known universities in the nation, as well as a booming economy and biotech environment in the Kendall Square area of the city, much of which has made it the amazing place that it is today. I also wanted to just give a little bit of background on how personal PB is to me. I was born and raised in Cambridge. I went to high school in Cambridge and I went to college in Cambridge. And I remember the very first PB cycle is something I participated in when I was a middle schooler. The process of being able to literally say what I wanted to see in my city and have that potential of seeing it actually happen, have people there intentionally to listen to me and to put in place, what I was thinking about, whatever was on my mind as an 8th grader when I was younger. But it was just such an amazing prospect that it drew me back. And so, to me, this process and the intentionality behind what Cambridge puts forward every year for PB is something that produces, real results and, fosters a sort of civic engagement and optimism to see, to create new community leaders and, potentially build it further in the future. But with that, I'll jump into what PB even is and what this means. So participatory budgeting, put more broadly, is a process where community members get to directly decide how to spend a portion of the city's budget on projects to improve Cambridge. So the budget has typically been around $1 million, and it is an intentionally allocated budget item every single fiscal year for the city. Functionally, it gives real people real power over real money in the city. And Cambridge residents, since the start of the first PB cycle in 2014, have allocated $9.5 million to pay for 72 PB projects that were come up with, built, and voted on by city residents. So before I jump too much into the weeds of how timeline-wise, how PB works, I was thinking a lot about this question of what community engagement even means. I think we often see it, when it's a requirement for like a grant application, when it's just something that, a supervisor says, oh, make sure you checked off your community engagement part of this project. It's, it sometimes feels like it's reduced to communication or just reduced to almost a one-way interaction. Does this mean, an email, like an email blast to my email list of 1,000 subscribers is enough? Does this mean dropping off a couple hundred flyers on doors is enough? Does this mean I'm even pushing a limit with a survey? Like, do I just put a survey out to the community and that's my community engagement done? And, it's this word engagement. I think, it takes it a step further, right? We're talking about a two-way interaction, a partnership, exactly what Fidel and Bianca just mentioned. And it pushes the question of what does it actually mean to engage with the community? So that is really the drive of PB. And the focus of it is particularly within the city's budgeting process. So PB, the timeline. It's a little bit complicated, but I'll walk through it and focus on how each of our stages speaks to this, level of engagement. How do we maintain this two-way communication through the entire process? So in Cambridge, PB takes around 7 months from start to finish. And this is not including the time it takes to actually build the projects that are ultimately funded. And that's another important point. Meaningful engagement takes time, and it is important. It is essential to be intentional about setting aside that time and seeing it through. So PB in Cambridge, what fills up those 7 months are 4 stages. The first is idea collection, where we quite literally pose the question out to the community. If you had $1 million to improve your community, how would you spend it? Any community member is welcome to submit an idea. And once those ideas are collected and that idea collection period ends, which lasts about a month, we shift into our second stage of proposal development, which is the longest stage of PB in Cambridge. This stage lasts roughly 3 months, and it's the time in which ideas go from, very service level ideas, something as simple as a 1-sentence request, and it transforms into an actionable, a tangible project that can actually be implemented, all with the support and honestly the leadership of volunteer Cambridge residents. Finally, the third stage is the citywide voting stage, which is a 10-day voting window. And once that voting window is complete and the winning projects have been decided, implementation kicks off at the start of the following fiscal year. So I'm going to go ahead and jump a little bit deeper into each of these stages and explain how each of them serve their own individual role in this broader community engagement exercise. So idea collection. We are currently in the idea collection phase of PB, and this is what I like to call the middle ground in terms of like a degree of engagement for PB. So this, like I said before, it's an opportunity that's open to all community members throughout the city. You don't have to be a resident. You don't have to be a US citizen. You can be any age at all. Anyone is welcome to submit any idea that they have. And we spend both the summer and this past month of September traveling around the city, joining a lot of community events. We do door knocking with our street team. We sit in on some, housing communities barbecues. We try to tap into every single community that we've had the luxury of engaging with over these past 10 years of PB. We also visit youth centers. We go to classrooms. We visit our ESOL classrooms at our Cambridge Community Learning Center to try to gather, ideas from everyone possible. And we want to encourage the fact that there is no idea too small. There is no idea too crazy, at least at this point in the process, but really pushing, trying to spark the most creative and, innovative things that we can find at this stage. So another incredibly important aspect is, of course, accessibility. It's one thing to, put all these resources into trying to reach as many folks as possible. And it's another thing to make the avenues through which you're making your voice heard is actually accessible. And so idea collection is done through a number of ways. You can do it on paper, the way we have shown in a lot of these images. We do it in person during these workshops. People are welcome to call in with their ideas. They're welcome to write emails with their ideas. And the most engaged with method is our PB Idea Collection website. So this is something I encourage folks to peruse if it's interesting to you. But this is our PB Idea Collection website, where it's essentially like a form. So when you visit the site, you see this big map of Cambridge, and each of these dots indicates an idea that somebody has submitted. And in order to submit the idea, it just needs a title, it needs a location, and it needs a brief description. And folks have the chance to also view other people's ideas that they've submitted and even explore the function of commenting, having a full dialogue, supporting ideas, and just generally exploring what their neighbors are thinking and what kinds of projects their neighbors think they would like to see through this PB process. So following idea collection, which is actually set to close next Tuesday in Cambridge, we move into proposal development. So this process is what I see as the most intense period of engagement that we do, or the most direct period. This is that 3-month part of the process where we recruit what are called volunteer PB delegates. We actually have a couple PB alumni in the room, but these PB delegates are Cambridge residents, and they range in, all ages across the city, come from all neighborhoods. We've got high schoolers to university students to folks who just work in the area, all the way to retirees. And they join the process, and their role is to quite literally read and review every single idea that came through during that idea collection phase and work together with city staff to turn them into those actionable projects. And so this stage is, I think, the heart of the process. It encourages and creates the opportunity for folks who just live in the city to interact directly with city staff, have face-to-face conversations with them and better understand how these projects can be turned into real things. And finally, the PB process, or at least the community engagement aspect of it, usually ties up every year with our voting stage. Again, we emphasize, the aspects of accessibility during this process. You're allowed to vote on paper in our in-person events, over email, over the phone, and in person at, and on the website. That's what I meant to say. On our online voting site. All those platforms are translated into our top 8 most spoken languages in Cambridge. And yeah, winning projects are announced in a celebratory event. It's typically one that's attended by many of our volunteers who join the process. And that is usually where the community engagement aspect of PB rounds off. So why does Cambridge even do PB, right? It's a resource intensive process. And it's, like I said before, it's a long process, but what's the purpose? And so at its core, PB is intended to provide a space for community members to engage directly and directly contribute to how the city can be improved for them. It's not, not everybody feels comfortable coming to City Hall and saying something during public comment. Not everybody has a direct relationship with a city councilor. Not everybody really fully understands all the complexities of how the city operates. PB is intended to be, that first stepping stone, maybe that first step through the door of better understanding how the city works and how it can work better for them. It's also such an important tool that the budget office uses and the city as a whole to ensure that the actual city's budget, everything beyond PB, reflects the public's needs. And it's a way for us to inform them of existing initiatives. So PB is a really powerful way to attract folks to come in, right? But, a problem or a good problem that we often come across with a lot of the ideas that we receive, we tell the volunteers, we don't move forward with these because something actually already exists. The city already has a solution for this problem. So it's a great way to direct people to these existing resources and essentially teach them how to find them in the future. And finally, it's a central part of fostering general civic engagement and community spirit. It can create future community leaders and ways to work closely with the broader community. A major initiative that we took, especially starting last PB cycle, is engaging with youth. So the voting requirements for PB, you only have to be 12 years and older or in 6th grade and up. And we have this amazing civics curriculum with our Cambridge Public Schools curriculum. And so we set aside voting days for all middle schoolers to come and experience what it's like to go to the ballot, register to vote, and then make sure to decide who you're going to vote for, research these projects that are on the ballot before you sit down and cast your vote. And so the goal is to build these good habits, build this image of understanding, okay, this is how you can make your voice heard. This is just one avenue of being a part of building the community that you live in. So just a few takeaways from, what we've learned in Cambridge after doing PB for all these years. We're coming up on a decade now with our 11th PB cycle. And it's important to note that PB has evolved quite a bit since we first implemented it, and the format that we use now is not the same thing that we started with. So that's, with community engagement, it's not this one size fits all for every single situation. You're going to have to adapt to the way things change. With PB, one of the more intentional things that we do with its format is that it's layered. There are degrees to, how committed one needs to be or how engaged one needs to be to still have a chance to be a part of the process. From proposal development being the more extreme side of things, requiring volunteers to actually, truly get a hand in that project building process, to something as simple and quick as the vote, while still getting a chance to make your voice heard. And it's also about creating this partnership. I really loved that Fidel and Bianca pointed this out in their speech as well. But, it brings people closer to the city and it humanizes it in a way as well. It's, as just a resident, it's easy to kind of see the city as a bit of a mysterious entity that takes the trash out once a week and tows the car, gives me parking tickets. It's a good way to kind of, understand these are the people who are actually doing it. This is a good way to get a chance to meet with them face to face and, not only recognize some of them as your neighbors, but also just understand this is a collaboration where it's possible to work together and move forward. And this space is intentionally made to have precisely this kind of dialogue. And lastly, the reward is also the projects themselves. They open doors for what can be in the future in the sense that PB really can spark some truly creative project ideas, perhaps some projects that may be overlooked in all the other budgeting things that the city is thinking about. And it's such an amazing way for residents to have a true stake in what they are building in the city that they live in. Something that we also, communicate to folks who participate in PB is that just because a project doesn't win through PB, it doesn't mean it can't be implemented elsewhere. So these ideas are things that are kept and communicated and spread throughout the city, even outside of the PB process, to always have that dialogue circulating across department heads and have that, within the minds of everyone who's working in the city as things that can potentially be implemented in the future. And so I want to close off with just a couple of examples of PB projects that have won funding and been implemented in the city. Just a few things. An example of such is we've got a small microforest over there. One winning PB project funded 3 of those across the city. This one is a very recently completed project, one of my favorites. It's a mural by one of our elementary schools, and it was a wonderful collaborative effort with a local artist and many of the students from that school who worked together to create the beautiful mural that is there today. Solar panels on our main library building was actually also a PB funded project from a very early cycle. Over here, we have these e-bikes for watering trees. These are used by some of the folks at our DPW program as part of their urban forestry program in maintaining and watering trees during the summer watering season. And lastly, this graphic over here is correlated with a winning project from the PB10 cycle, so from the cycle that just ended. And we're in the process of, or the intention of the project is to build shade structures, seating shade structures in little pocket park areas around the city. And we're in the process of looking for and pinpointing locations for where that should go. So we've got a survey going on and bringing it along in a lot of our PB idea collection related events to communicate with folks that not only can you stay involved with, voting and idea collection and volunteering, but you get a say in how that project is ultimately built and where it might turn up. But yeah, this is just, I want to thank you all for listening to this quick run through of PB. I hope it, highlights some of the ways in which these kinds of tools can potentially be used in different settings. And I do want to emphasize that, PB is not, a single prescriptive format that has to be implemented exactly the way that was described. It can be done on an organization level. It doesn't have to be done on a citywide level necessarily. And each of those 4 stages doesn't have to be implemented together. They can be kind of taken apart and done so, section by section. But if folks are interested in perhaps taking a look at other examples of how PB is being done, I highly encourage you to visit the Participatory Budgeting Project, which is an awesome nonprofit that essentially guides organizations and cities in starting their own PB processes. And Boston and Somerville, some of our neighbors, have also begun their own processes. So I think that's about it. Thank you all so much.
Oh, I love that so much. I mean, one of the things you will get from all of our speakers today is a sense of going from seeing the community as something to be feared and managed to seeing communities as a resource that can make your project better and actually more efficient compared to fighting at the end, which I think often happens, or can too often happen. We are shifting from municipal partnerships to state partnerships in introducing Crystal Johnson, who is the Assistant Secretary of Environmental Justice at the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. She's also one of Greater Boston's top environmental and sustainability leaders with decades of experience as a senior environmental planner focused on energy, natural resources, and the built environment, all through the lens of environmental justice and climate equity. Her reach goes far beyond Massachusetts, making major contributions to multiple state agencies, universities, electric utilities, all the way to the United Nations. Undersecretary Johnson is one of the two rare bridge builders who can translate people's everyday challenges into high-level public policy and back. Undersecretary Johnson.
I was excited to hear that. I was like, wow. And I think I'm going to just move this along. Excellent. So I'm really excited to be here for many reasons. So while I will share around community engagement, particularly around what the state is doing, so everybody here, whether you're with law firms, with AE firms, or other types of consulting services that are serving municipalities, that are really also serving their community, that you'll see that it's relevant to you. And so I'm really excited to talk to this pool of professionals regarding community engagement. And it is my hope that you gain information and that you become more informed from what I share, that it ultimately inspires you to broaden your perspective around what community engagement needs to be. And so one of the things I always start with is just giving you a context. I'm a planner, so I always like to know in a conversation, so where are we going? So I'm going to talk to you about environmental justice and equity briefly, talk about what the state is doing under the Haley administration and being led by Undersecretary Power, who I'm thrilled to be working with. And I'm going to talk about then what does that really mean for meaningful engagement with what you may be working on. So I always start with what is your understanding of environmental justice and equity? Because while I greatly appreciate that in the last few years, environmental justice, equity has become so popular that many organizations who, I'm going to be very bold, have ignored it for decades, while others have always pointed out there's a problem, are now on board. And I'm really glad to be in this type of venue, talking with the consultants on the other side, who I'm somewhat referring to, and I can say that because my past was I did work on the consulting side. That we're here now in moving forward. But I do want to plant a seed of really, like, when people say, oh, environmental justice, do they really understand how deep it really goes and what it is rooted in? So while for environmental justice, you could talk for months, really teach a course on it. I'm just going to really highlight that. But most of you understand what it does look like, but I want to give some acknowledgement to the unsung people, particularly from the 60s and the 70s, who were primarily, I'll say at the time, particularly African-American, in communities that because they did not have economic power by design, and they did not have political power by design, they were very targeted for getting the worst of the worst as far as zoning and where companies, governments, others placed things. And while we always knew about racism in a systemic way, it's so intricately designed, when it became environmental racism, which had a different angle that added to others, it became more of an immediate public health issue. And you had people being next to PCBs and having the worst of worst, and that's their family. And that what came out from mothers saying, not today, not anymore. And their strategic thinking, without any of those resources, they coordinated and they got environmental racism recognized as environmental injustices. It picked up so much more in the 80s. Then you really have a movement happening in the 90s that ties to tribal rights and more. Give me a quick summary. So now here we are with an Office of Environmental Justice and Equity. And when we work with people and we talk about community engagement and the involvement, people are like, wow, that's so much, that's a lot. And I'm like, it is, and it's going to be needed to just right the wrongs, but then also to move forward in an effective way. And I remember when I was talking with somebody and I had shared with them, you know, about EJ and moving forward with effective community engagement and such, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. And I said, and you're not the one even living in it, you know? And so when you work on projects, and you guys make decisions, whether again, law firm, planning companies, A&E, the municipalities, your decisions are affecting somebody in a community that you may not live in yourself, but it is affecting somebody else's public health. It can affect their water, their air, their child's health, and so forth. So we have responsibilities that are huge. Some people can go to work and their work doesn't doesn't matter on some of the things, but I can say for a lot of the things we want, your decision does affect somebody else's life, their short-term, long-term family health. So when we talk about environmental justice and community engagement, want to give the context so you understand how pertinent it is. So one thing I want to highlight is that for environmental justice, it really looked at the right to have be protected from environmental hazards and to have meaningful involvement. Really fortunate here in Massachusetts, we have the Haley Driscoll administration, and they did something that's unprecedented, and I want to share with you. What they did was they created a whole new structure for environmental justice and equity. While there was within the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, EEA, an Undersecretary of Environment and an Undersecretary of Energy, what the Haley Driscoll did was they elevated environmental justice and equity rather than being a side issue or within others, and created a role for us, an undersecretary, as I mentioned, led by Maria Balin Power, a very amazing leader, grassroots organizing experience that is not the normal for a government leader team. And we have a team of people who see themselves as change agents and less just being a government employee. So we're at an exciting time. The Haley Driscoll created the Office of Environmental Justice and Equity. We have now around 7 of us. But they also did was equal to the climate, environment, have EJ there, they funded a great deal. And that for all of our different EEA agencies and offices like Department of Environmental Protection, Coastal Zone Management, about 13 of them, we have EJ liaisons that have gotten hired, getting hired, and they're helping us because with environmental justice and equity, we're focused on internal and external efforts. One of the things that we had just helped us with our structure of what are we doing is that we released in February an environmental justice strategy document. And if you're not familiar with it, you should be, because maybe if you have a municipality, it could serve as a model for maybe an EJ document within yourself, or if you're with a company, having an EJ engagement strategy also. It's our hope that it serves as a tool. And so that right there, I'll just share as a document. It's 160 pages, comprised of individual chapters so that each chapter has a different agency's EJ strategy. My office's strategy, we inherited primarily a lot of it from the last administration and was finalized on our team, but we added touches based on Haley administration's focus, our office's focus. So we have 33. Some of them relate to equitable workforce, equitable procurement. It's looking at a relationship with tribal and indigenous. Of course, it also is looking at meaningful engagement. And we have others that, sorry about that. We have other topics there where it ranges from how are we looking at grants? How are we looking at cumulative impact? How are we ensuring there's equitable distribution of benefits and burdens? So it's quite comprehensive. The key part of what we're focused on is definitely on engagement. And so this will help paint a picture of how the state is embodying a change approach to engagement that hopefully, again, serves as a model, but will also let you know that you're in a state that is at a new beginning. And then what does that mean for you as how you look at engagement? So our engagement, internal and external, around community engagement. So for internal engagement, we meet with our EJ liaisons in each of our different offices, divisions, bureaus, and we have EJ liaisons, and we're making sure there's consistency, and we're talking to them about engagement. And engagement, even for them, is internal and external, because equally with external, with how are we working with communities and CB, community-based organizations, the municipalities, and helping them advance EJ, we're also working internally, because when we talk about both systemic barriers, they're based on the people advancing them. So how do we then look internally and say, how do we then make the process more equitable? How do we inform people? And so it's internal, external. We also meet with an EJ interagency working group. Very fortunate that while we're with the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, there are others. There's housing and living communities, there's veterans, and then there's also transportation and education. all of them we convene in helping them with EJ strategy planning. Because again, if we're in a state, we need to have consistency and then we can move forward together. And so really excited that we do talk about what is happening with engagement, because for all of the state projects, we receive federal funds, we have commitments, and then we give out and we allocate. And then how is that going to be shaped so that it accounts for EJ and equity? And so we're in an interesting journey, and it's ongoing, but excited to be there. So that's what our internal engagement is. Our external engagement is how are we engaging with the communities? So with environmental justice, while we have a EJ council, as you can imagine, a governor appointed, one that meets every 2 months, about 15 people. We recognize that EJ is unique. It started as a grassroots movement and wanted to make sure that we stood by the different organizations that have always stood by communities and saying, how do we hear from you? We love that it's an EJ council, but it doesn't capture the whole, and it'd be ironic to not be engaged with the grassroots. So we started this at the time at Justice 40, because it started around helping be a bridge for EEA contacts going for federal grants to make sure we're partnering with communities, understand what people need, want, and so forth. However, as we're advancing now, it's always evolving, because when you do community engagement, it is iterative, it is creative, it is critical thinking, and so it has to evolve because just by nature, life evolves. So while we've worked on that for almost a year as Justice 40, we're now looking at a new way of how we engage. So we have a network of around 115 CBOs statewide on a database, and we ask them to share this information with their peers, and we always get more, and it expands. We then present to them projects, and they usually come from the state, but sometimes they're coming from other projects from a municipality that's like, wow, we want to inquire with or find out. And so we're like, how can we be a resource? You want to meet with our Justice 40 or EJCBO group, and we can send out an announcement alerting them to opportunities or grants, or they want feedback and such. So we value the way that we engage externally. And then there are other ways in which they are more CBO led, they invite us and such. So we're constantly figuring out ways to reach out and get more to the grassroots and network. We're doing some asset mapping so we can say, wow, by region and by town, what are the EJ CBOs? And they're not all the same. Some care more about energy, some may care about food justice, some may care about transportation. There's a wide range, but they're all relevant, and glad to be connected with them. And then we've served as a resource to help them connect with each other. And so all new ways of what does engagement look like. Something I'll also share lightly for everything that we're doing with the state. There are different processes right now. After we did the EJ strategy, we now have some effective communication tools that are just in early stage. One's draft, one's going to be finalized. And they're tools that the state will need to use, or if you're working with the state, but they also are great models for what you're working on. Do you need to have a language access plan for your company for how you engage here in Massachusetts? Should you think about public involvement plan? So wanted to bring that up. I'm going to share some brief tips regarding the community engagement. For a lot of the companies here, very aware that sometimes a public comment period might be the design, and asking everybody that as the state values community engagement, that again, the AE firms, the law firms, anybody representing municipalities, all the consultants revisit how they view community engagement. The first one up there is equitable distribution of benefits and burdens. This is because before you are engaging a community, you're only really engaging a community, anticipate that there's going to be impacts. We're in a new day. It's not just the same old EJ communities getting the same old burden and placement. There now is a look at the equitable distribution of benefits and burdens. That should be determining your communities that you actually go to and such, and what is a cumulative impact, analysis helping to shape, that. So that is what happens first. Equitable distribution of benefits and burdens. If by chance your community, and this applies even if it's not an EJ community, but if it is one too, is that I want everybody to look at this as a positive opportunity. It's such a great win for a project to engage effectively with the community because it will create better public relations. It will help the process go better and be well received. The key part is understanding education is a key part. That's your education. Understanding like the historic engagement. What has happened there? Have they ever been engaged appropriately? Has it been effective? What have we done? And what type of status is that relationship and how can you build forward? What is that community? Who are the different EJ CBOs? How do they connect? And it's doing in a way to do due diligence where you're recognizing community as a valued asset that should be reached out to. We value collaborative relationships. It was so great to hear about what was happening in Chelsea. The state wants to help foster and be a bridge that I feel like, wow, for municipalities, if you want to help build relations with CBOs that you've always had, but may not have had a cultivated relationship, we'd love to help you with that. Love to work with anybody here. We ask that you engage local EJ CBOs prior to having an ask of them. That means engage them early on, build relationships, find out what the community values, enjoys, needs, are concerned about, and it starts a conversation. One of the things I have to say is many people say, well, how do you earn trust? I'm like, you do the right thing. And so you do have to earn that trust. And that comes into who is your impactful community engagement team that you have. They need to be people, persons, and you need to have a strong, effective facilitator. When we talk about community engagement, it is an art. And if you're trying to build a bridge, heal relationships, get input, you really have to have a nice dynamic. And that is not for everybody. And so really think about who is on your team. For municipalities and industry leaders, really excited that you guys can think about advisory working groups that are permanent. And so it's not just project by project, but some way that way. Wanted to just quickly highlight, again, direct input. And then that input changes the outcome, meaning you cannot no longer come in with, this is the original scope. It's for perception only, community engagement. And now is a new day where you can come in with some ideas to start the conversation. The input will help change that course in the scope. And that is something really significant. So I'm here, our office, to be a resource. I welcome everybody here reaching out and saying, wow, we're kind of challenged by engagement. How could we do this? And we really are excited to have that part. And the ultimate part, as I said before, this is not a technical science. The best part about this is creative problem solving of how to engage in creative manner in a new way that helps your project. It's not seen as onerous. And if your strong planning team is concerned about it's going to throw off the schedule, you need to tell them to plan better, because I can say I'm an environmental planner and I take planning seriously, and people are like, it's going to disrupt the schedule. I'm like, no, many other things disrupt the schedule. Community engagement is going to help it be leaner and more efficient. So hopefully that gave you a framework of what the state is doing and would love to help you do, because that's where we're moving. So thank you.
I just keep going to the national level and saying, instead of voter suppression, imagine if we had this. Thank you so much. So our last speaker before the negotiation exercise is Vicente Harrison, who got up quite early for us because he's in Oregon, bless him. And he's the health, safety, and emergency management for Portland, Oregon's Vibrant Community Support Services. I had the chance to see him present about their outstanding work with unhoused Portland residents who are living in public parks during COVID. While this was a challenging time for all of us, unhoused people are truly among the most vulnerable to extreme weather, violence, poor mental and physical health, and of course the pandemic. Vicente spoke about how he and his colleagues worked with unhoused community members to ensure that they had sanitary services and to help them connect with opportunity for housing. He's here to talk about what it takes to do this work well. Vicente?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. My name is Vicente Harrison. As mentioned, I'm the Health, Safety, and Emergency Manager for Vibrant Communities Service Area, which is a transition in government for us. I used to be able to say with Portland Parks and Recreations, but with our government restructures, I am now a part of the Vibrant Communities Service Area, which includes the Children's Levy, Portland Parks, and our Arts and Nature program. But I have the great pleasure to present unto you, and thank you again for inviting me. I am very excited, and I'm also up very early. Probably a little bit of adrenaline kind of help with that as well, just to be able to share some good ideas so that we can all, take from this great forum today and add to our respective programs, our policies, and how we serve the community. So the first thing I want to point out to you is the typo that I have on slide number 1. Coffee is something that's big out here in the Pacific Northwest, in Seattle, and in Oregon. And I didn't have my coffee when I was updating my slide, and obviously my slide deck needs to be a little bit awake this morning as well. So it is supposed to read Climate Adaptation Forum as opposed to Climate Adaptation Forum. But, those words are interchangeable. Adaptation means adaptation is modification to make fit under conditions of the environment. And I think that's what we're all here for today, is to how can we, transition our programs, transition the work we do to really address the climate emergency that we're all facing as an entire global community. So with that being said, again, Vicente Harrison, I know my title really doesn't tell much, but I oversee security and safety for all of the parks in Portland, Oregon. That's 12,000 acres of land, about 16 community centers, so many hundreds of basketball courts, sports fields, playgrounds, etc. I was promoted into this position from my management of the Park Ranger program. Now, this was right prior to COVID. So my intro to this role was, congratulations, manage the COVID pandemic, manage this global pandemic for our city and our parks. So it was a great challenge, but I learned a lot as well. And as you can see on the screen, just working with a great team is what helped us today. So before we move on to slide number 2, Portland Park's mission is to provide equitable access to welcoming places, programs and services that improve community health and our environment. So we really embrace this challenge to live up to our mission. And hopefully I'll be able to convey some of that in the slide today with this presentation today. And I really appreciate Crystal's presentation, because there's some themes that you're hearing from both Crystal, Melissa, and others that have presented. Engagement. When we talk about public service, that's the number one thing we do, is how do we relate to the community? How can we relate better to the community? And it's something that we don't ever master. It's something that we got to constantly reevaluate and get better at, and making sure it's meaningful and that we earn trust is 2 things that I took away from Crystal's presentation. And thank you again. So if we could move to slide number 2. So who we are, again, safety, security, and emergency professionals, emergency management, again, with the management of the COVID pandemic. We are a team of dedicated people. And I think if you sign up for any government role, there has to be a level of dedication in terms of engaging with the community. Our team includes the Park Ranger program and the safety team, which includes risk specialists and a safety officer that I work alongside. We work to prevent illnesses, injuries within not only our internal stakeholders, which is our staff, but also external, those that come to our parks. And, you know, they didn't tell me this when I signed up for the role, but it's nearly 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, because we have people that are working in the field during all of those times, and we got to be ready to respond when emergencies happen. So next slide, please. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our Park Ranger program, public safety ambassadors who are focused on education and positive engagement. This is very important when we talk about our relationship with those that are unhoused. To be able to build and earn that trust again is something that our Rangers had to learn. When I first started in this program 12 years ago, we had a bunch of staff that were trying to be junior police officers. And that was not the model of the profession. And that's not the model of parks. Our parks are open to everyone, and we want people invited into our public spaces. So we really had to do a lot of training to kind of, you know, not only select the right people to do this work, but also make sure they understood that our role and police role are completely different. So our Urban Park Ranger program, again, covers that 12,000 acres. That includes urban parks and natural areas. That also include community centers. And we also manage all of the street trees within Portland. So there's a environmental element, a climate element to that work as well, which is a whole nother presentation within itself. Our interpretive model for our Ranger program is the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics, which is we've developed our own urban park principles. So Leave No Trace originally started in the backcountry, where people were going out deep in the woods, creating a mess and leaving it there. Obviously, it was a contamination to the environment in that space. So Leave No Trace came along and developed principles on how to deal with the backcountry. Well, that moved to the front country when we all go camping, you know, nearby our city environments where we go out, you know, not far away from maybe a state park. So that's the front country elements of Leave No Trace. We and I believe New York and a handful of others are some of the few programs in the country that actually develop urban park principles. And these same Leave No Trace principles adapted to a urban parks setting. So this is a part of our environmental education. We actually keep data. We keep data on how often we convey a Leave No Trace principle to the community. So whether it is knowing before you go, sticking to the trails, throwing away trash, or picking up dog waste, leaving what you find, fires only allowed in designated areas, keeping wildlife wild, being considerate of others on the trail, and sharing the trail. These are things that we actually tabulate, and we're hoping that the more we're able to show that we're providing this environmental education, the science of Leave No Trace is if you convey to people the reason behind city codes and rules, then they'll be more likely to understand and not violate. So this has been a incredible experience. In the photo you see, we have the Leave No Trace organization. Their traveling trainers come out and do training with our staff, and we host a community event as well. And this one was actually this year at Mount Tabor Park, where we had, it's in a wildfire hazard zone and other impacts to the park that we wanted to make sure folks were aware of. So the Portland Park Rangers in the city of Portland, we are the leaders in referrals for the unhoused community to social service. So show social service resources. So we have, obviously our parks are open to everyone, and we invite everyone to our parks. But when you don't have any place to live, obviously one of the places that people often convene to is our city park. So Rangers engage with individuals. They're not shunned away. Obviously, we make them aware of what they're allowed and what they're not allowed to do. But by building community relationships and partnerships, we're able to directly refer them to resources that are going to help them be in a better position, a safer position, a more sustainable position, and really lessen the impact on our parks and in that way, the environment as well. Next slide, please. So when we talk before we get into the details of how we work with the unhoused or the houseless or the homeless, there's just many different terms on how people describe this population. But before we get in how we engage them during climate emergencies, the number one thing that we have to understand is, compassion is something that we just have to really check at the door, right? As is written here on the slide, to recognize that others are suffering. And the reality is there's compassion fatigue as well. So we have staff that work tremendously hard to prepare our parks and our natural areas for the community to enjoy. And someone that is suffering that doesn't have resources can come in and really, cause damage to, thousands of dollars worth of staff work. And that compassion really turns to frustration and sometimes anger, but it's something that we got to constantly revisit and understand who we're dealing with and how can we serve them better. So to recognize their suffering, to take action to help. And that's really where we had to modify, as opposed to trying to police people out of our parks. Well, how can we be a resource and support them in our parks? So in turn, they understand that this resource is for them as well, and ultimately not be an offender and, really appreciate and value the park like we all do. And again, just the L word is in here. Compassion embodies a tangible expression of love for those who are suffering. And we all can say as professionals in government and private entities, whomever's on the call today, that you love what you do. I mean, you wouldn't be participating in this forum if you didn't want to get better at what you do, because you love what you do. So that extends to those that we serve, and it includes the most vulnerable. So compassion is number one. Next slide, please. I wish I was in person. I'm a much better presenter in person. I don't like saying next slide, please. It's just something that you have to do when you're doing virtual. But in any case, what we do when we encounter the unsheltered. So there's some assumptions that we just have to not make. And this is where bias awareness comes into play as well in terms of equity. We can't assume that people always have a safe place to go. If they did, they would probably be there. And the safest option in most places, in most times, is in a public space where they can be seen or where they know resources will be available unto them. So we can't assume they have somewhere else to go, because when you say you can't be here, well, they're going to show up somewhere else. And is that really the best community model for all of those in the community and partners that we work alongside? We can't assume that everyone is dangerous. Again, remember that people experiencing houselessness are more likely to be victims of violence than to perpetuate it. So they're not all dangerous, and many, as it is written right below, many conditions that we see are a reflection of the experience that they're dealing with. They're dealing with trauma. They're dealing with sometimes dehydration. They're dealing with a lot of other issues. So we got to make sure that we understand that they're not. We understand that it's not that they are dangerous, but we just have to really look closer on what they're experiencing, and again, connecting with referral agencies that may be able to help. The photos, this is a little hut that was built in one of our natural areas. And this is an individual that, one of our urban landscapes was really camping out there and packed up his belongings after we engaged him, who sometimes refused resources as well. Next slide, please. So when we encounter them, we greet them as people. We have supplies available. We also, connect them to emergency resources if necessary. In the photos here, this is an individual that was on the train tracks, and he was ready for a train to run over him. And thankfully, being able to engage and earn his trust, we were able to get him off there and refer him to resources. This other photo is of an individual that had chronic alcoholism in our parks. And over the years, he was very violent, very belligerent. But over the years, by working with him and extending that compassion unto them, he was able to get into a treatment program and change around his life. And he stopped me in the park. I didn't even recognize him. He didn't look like that when he was belligerent. But, after being referred to agencies, but being able to show that compassion to him, he was able to change his life around. He stopped me and let me know, just gave me a thanks of appreciation. I had to capture a photo of that. Next slide, please. So in terms of,
sorry, I'm going to give you a 3-minute warning too. Sorry.
Yeah. No worries. So again, in terms of how we engage with the community with climate change, there are protocols that we plan for in terms of when there are heat events. If we're going into winter, there's also winter event protocols that we plan for, but plan for success when it comes to engaging the community when there's a climate crisis. Make sure that you are connecting with community partners early, and just informal and formal phone calls are key. Make sure that you're identifying the vulnerable populations and serving them first, and then everyone else will fall into line once you identify the most vulnerable. We activate cooling shelters. We convert some of our community centers into cooling shelters, and in the winter, we convert them into warming shelters, sometimes only day, and if it's really cold, overnight. And then we also, during the summer, we extend our water assets. So misting stations, pools stay open longer hours. These are just some things that you can do to serve the most vulnerable during a climate emergency. Next slide, please. So there's also, this is stressful for your staff, for you personally. So making sure that we're serving internal as well as external. So making sure that people can stay resilient. So we provide service to help those that are serving the populations and the community as well. You can go to the next slide. How we do this is we have a T for the soul model, meaning we provide a critical stress debriefing for staff that are working with these populations so that they feel supported and can continue with their cup full to serve this population. Next slide, please. This T for the soul model, we bring out refreshments, we bring out de-stress tools. We have a counselor on site through our EAP, our Employee Assistance Program. And again, this is to help fuel staff and support staff as they deal with engaging the community that can sometimes be frustrating and stressful. Next slide, please. And lastly, this whole forum about is things don't get easier or more forgiving. This is just a quote that I feel is very timely, but we get stronger and more resilient. So I'm more than happy to engage with you in your personal entities as well. Thank you for allowing me to present today. And then we're going to open it up for any questions if we have time. And thank you, Jessamine.
Thank you. That was wonderful. So we have packed so much in, so we haven't had too much time for questions at all. But what we're going to do now is take a quick 10-minute break. So this is your great opportunity to talk amongst yourselves, ask questions of our speakers. My name is Jeff. All right, in-person people, virtual people, it is time for part 2 of today's forum. I'm looking for Julie, who is making her way up. And Julie is going to introduce our fantastic facilitator for the second half of today's program. Her name is up on the screen. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Julie, who will kick things off with Carri. And I'm going to get you all set up with a fun exercise. So I'll be coming around momentarily with some papers. All right.
All right. Thank you, everybody. So, okay. So I have known Carri Hulet for actually a very long time. One note is that her bio has her former employer, Consensus Building Institute, and she is now broken off to CH Consulting. What does that CH stand for? So 6 years ago, Carri and I partnered with cities and towns to launch the Resilient Mystic Collaborative, which has become one of the most successful climate resilience partnerships in the country. Self-proclaimed by many metrics. Way beyond that, though, Carri is an extraordinary facilitator and process architect, helping groups of people make progress on sometimes very painful challenges such as climate migration. And as you'll see, she does it often looking like she's about to laugh, making her convenings one that you feel more refreshed and inspired going out of than you felt going into. Carri is going to lead us in both in-person and remote negotiations exercises that will help us get some muscle memory around the community engagement ideas we've heard this morning. Carri?
Thank you, Jewel. You walked away without a hug almost. That's not very Julie-like. Really happy to see you all. I'm happy to see many of you that I know and those that I don't. I hope we get to know each other. When you're talking about community engagement, there are so many skill sets that are required to do it well. You need good designers, you need good interpreters and translators, you need people with a lot of good engineering skills and that knowledge base. There's so many things that you need, but one thing you almost always need is the ability to actually talk with people, understand what you want and understand what they want, and try to find an agreement you can both live with, or you can all live with, which is more often the case. And so I thought today we would do an exercise that will help all of us practice one micro skill that I think is really, really important anytime you are trying to make decisions with another person. So that's what we're going to do. If any of you, whether here in the room or online, have done any sort of negotiations training through the program on negotiation, you may have already played the game that we're going to play today, because we use it a lot through the program on negotiation and the various sort of affiliated programs. But it's so good and it's fast and it really teaches an important skill. And I've played it probably 20 times and I like it. So if you've already done it, I hope you enjoy it and you learn something new this time. So it's called Redstone, and I am going to, how do I advance here? This? Okay, great. Here's the situation that you're going to find yourself in. You're in the city of Redstone. It's a population of 30,000. You will either be Angela Redstone or John Hammond. If you're Angela Redstone, you're a developer and you want to build luxury condos in Redstone. And if you're John Hammond, then you are a head of a residents association that is concerned about this development in particular because of gentrification, tax increases, and changes to community character. So in today's meeting, the two of you will negotiate a deal for a total number of units in the development and a percentage of those units that will be affordable housing, okay? The City Council and the Redevelopment Authority do have the authority to decide what happens here, but they have kind of with a wink and a nod said, if you two can work this out, we'll approve whatever you come to, okay? So that's the situation you're in. And these are the mechanics. We're going to read the general instructions, and this will be quiet time, okay? So let everybody read. We'll be reading general instructions. If you're here in the room, we have them on paper. And if you are online, then we will send you PDFs. Jackson's going to send those PDFs to you. After you have time to read your general instructions, then we will pair up. And these are random assignments. And here in the room, I'm going to ask you to pair with someone you do not know. You're welcome for that awkwardness. And online, you just are going to get assigned. So you may or may not know the person because Jackson doesn't know all your relationships. And so he's just going to randomly assign you. Then you will read the confidential instructions for your role. I will tell you how we'll decide whether you're Angela or John once you get there. and then you'll negotiate, and then we'll debrief afterward. And I'm warning you in advance that you will not have a lot of time to negotiate, and it will feel tight. And I apologize for that, but I don't think you all want to stay here until 2 p.m. So that's just how it's going to be. All right, those are the mechanics. And so we're going to pass out the general instructions, or they may already be on your table. Great. And Jackson, have you already sent them the link, or should I say? Okay, if you're online, if you're at your table, feel free to grab a copy of the instructions and start reading. Forgive me for talking over your reading for a moment. If you are online, Jackson's going to give you a link to 3 documents: the general instructions and the confidential instructions for both Angela and John. Please do not read the confidential instructions yet. Wait until we give you a role, but we wanted you to have all 3 so that you have access to it later. So please download all 3 documents, start reading the general instructions, and if you have any problem with the download, please communicate with Jackson online. Okay, you have about 8 minutes to do this reading. Okay, minutes go by faster in this room than in the rest of the world. Okay, great. So next up, here in the room, I'd like you to pair up with someone, and I'd like you to do this as quickly as you can, and this is what it's going to look like. Hi, will you be my partner? Okay, come here. And then we stand next to each other like that, okay? I want to see the pairs, so do it quickly. Stand next to your person and have a partner. Online, just give us a minute to do this. Here in the room, talk with your partner and discuss the month that you were born in, and whichever person was born closer to January, you're going to be Angela, okay? Now, if you were both in January, the person closest to the 1st of January will be Angela, okay? Figure it out real quick. That was hilarious. Okay, December is closer to January technically, but in this exercise, April is closer to January. I should have said beginning of the year, okay? If you're at the beginning of the year, you're Angela, okay? My apologies. Okay, so you guys are gonna head out now and you're gonna go negotiate, but if you are John, you're gonna come get your confidential instructions from me, and if you are Angela, you will go get them from Jessamine over there, okay? Angela's green, John is yellow. Wait. Okay, you can go anywhere in the 4 buildings on this floor. 4 rooms on this floor. This room, the next room, there are 2 more, okay? And there will be other people around you. It's just how it is. Just try to give everyone some comfortable space, okay? You have 15-ish, maybe even 20 minutes to do this. If you finish and you have a deal, you have an agreement, then come back to the room and that's how I will know, okay?
Please also avoid the hallway because it's very echoey. So please find a room so we are not disturbing the wonderful people who are hosting us. Yes, you can also stay here, of course.
Yeah,
we got comfy chairs.
Okay. All right. Those of you who are online, Jackson is now going to move you into your breakout rooms, and you will do the same.
Hi there. We will get resumed in about 5 minutes. Going to hang tight. We're going to do a report out, and everyone will have an opportunity to report out. So if you just want to hang tight, bring the whole group back.
All right, everyone. Let's come back together. Make sure you have in your mind the deal that you came to, if you came to a deal. Have it in your mind because I'm going to do a show of hands. And so I want you to have in your mind, for example, our deal was 15 affordable, 65 total, or whatever it is, 18 affordable and 70 total. Whatever it is, have that in your mind so that when I do a little poll here in a moment, we can just get a sense of where people landed in the room. Hello, people online. We can now see your faces. Hi. So glad to see you. If you are online and you don't have your video on, that is totally fine. But if you're okay having your video on, it would be nice because then we all feel like we are here together a little bit more. So for the 4 of you who do have your videos on, hello. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I know their little squares don't show up if they don't have their video on, but they're here and they played the game and we appreciate that. Hi, Jeffrey. That was about the nicest wave ever. Okay, show of hands, and online you can put this into the chat. How many people did the deal of 15 affordable and 65 total? Okay, sorry? Oh no, both people can raise their hand. Thank you. I'm not getting an exact count, I'm getting a feel. Okay, so you can both raise your hands. 18 affordable and 70 total. Okay, how about, actually, let's just do 70 total and any number of affordable. Anyone do, okay. That's what I thought, great, okay. And how about 75 total and any number of affordable? Great, 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 okay. And how about 80 total and any number of affordable? 1, 2, 3, okay, perfect, great. Okay, I wanna show you, if you went above 80, you cheated. You did not, what's that? And other amenities is good, it is good. And I applaud that. And also, your rules told you that you could not go above 80. So if you did go above 80, you have transgressed the rules. And that is an interesting conversation, but it's not the one we're having today. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because we are learning a micro skill, as I said, and that micro skill we are learning is about trading across interests within limits. So this is, oh, thank you. Oh, hello, all the other people. Yeah, do you mind? Hi. You're in a little laptop right here that you can't see, but you're right in front of my eyes. So within limits, so let's talk about limits first of all. In real life, we have real life constraints. Now, sometimes those constraints can be expanded and broadened. You can bring new resources to the conversation. You can expand the pie in various ways. And that is really important in terms of negotiation. It's not the skill I'm teaching right now, because sometimes those constraints are the constraints. There are actual physical constraints you have to work within. There are political constraints that you as the negotiators really don't have any influence over. There are the kinds of things you have to live within. So those limits, still, they don't mean that you can't find a deal, but it does mean that the space of deal making, the area or the zone of possible agreement, which we call the ZOPA in the negotiation nerd world, the zone of possible agreement is what it is. It's small and you have to find it. And the way you find it is you ask a lot of questions about what your negotiation partners are interested in, what they really care about, and in fact, what they care about the most. And then you have to find ways to reveal what you care about the most, what your interests are, so that they too can put into their calculations what you need in order for a deal that you can both live with. So in this exercise, this is what John's sheet looked like. And these yellow ones are the only possible agreements. So John goes into this thinking, I can't accept anything over here because I would not be doing my job as the neighborhood association representative, right, or resident association. If I try to go back with a deal over here, I'm going to lose my job, right, or lose my role with the neighborhood association. But I can agree to anything over here. And he might walk into the room, John might walk into the room thinking, I'm going to land way over here, right? That's the aspiration, a whole bunch of affordable units. But the reality is that Angela is only willing, this looks ugly, but Angela is only willing to do this narrow band here. So you have a job to do, a hard job to do, which is finding out where is that band. And technically, because if you don't make a deal, then the redevelopment authority and the city council will make the choice for you. Any of these should be better than the possibility that you leave it to chance with the city council, right? So that's the first, I said we would do one micro skill, but we're doing two, bonus. The first micro skill is to keep very clear in your mind what happens if we don't make a deal here at the table. And in this case, what happens is very uncertain. And if you can live with that uncertainty as Angela or as John, then you don't make a deal. But if you think the world of uncertainty is worse than what you could get here at the table, then you do everything you can to get the deal that is better than your alternative. Right? So many of you have heard this term, I'm sure, best alternative to a negotiated agreement, BATNA, BATNA. Now you know two nerd terms, ZOPA and BATNA. Okay, so anyway, any of those deals should have been better than your BATNA, which should have driven you to make a deal. And you should try to live within the constraints because it forces you to do the hard job of finding the ZOPA, right? So how do you find the ZOPA? In this case, what you have to do is find out what is important to them and what is important to me, and can we trade across those? So let me ask this question. Those of you who got to, let's see, I'd like anyone who got to 70. So this chart right here, can you guys see this over there? This chart right here is showing all the possible agreements. That's what these dark black dots are. And I'm showing a few agreements in order to illustrate a point here. So this agreement right here is 15 affordable and 65 total. That's a low value agreement, but it's still better than the alternative. To get 15 affordable and 65 total is still better than sending it back to the city council and the redevelopment authority. And so that is a totally reasonable, decent deal. But if you're Angela, these are Angela's points here. If you are Angela and you can get all the way over here to 80 units by only giving another 9 units of affordable, then that's super good for you. So your value has increased tremendously as Angela. While the benefit for John, even though the number of affordable increased, his point value doesn't increase. So for John, that doesn't feel like an increase, right? Based on the scoring that we gave you. So it feels better to go back to your community, I guess, and say, we got 24 units, but then they say, well, how many total? And he says, 80, right? So it's not a great deal for John either way, but it's better than coming back with nothing either way, right? And in this case, Angela would have figured out that all John really needs to be able to do is to go back to his community and say, I got more affordable housing than we would have gotten if we let it go to the city council and redevelopment authority. And so Angela has advocated for much more than necessarily she needed to, right? Same thing over here. In this case, this is where John advocates extremely well for a very high percentage of affordable housing. And the increase in units, I know 70 and 80 maybe don't seem that different, but in terms of the value to the different partners, it's very different, which is why we gave you points to drive your thinking on this. For Angela, the difference between doing 70 and 80 is really significant in her financial calculations. So she'd much rather have 80, right? But for John, between 15 and 23 is like, he can really drive that. And so that is worth much more because he gets far fewer total units. So anyway, the point is that if you understand trading across interests, you can help the other person get what they need, but still increase what you need even more. Does that make sense? Now, here's what's even more important. This line out here represents, if you're moving this direction, where John is getting more affordable units, Angela is getting more total units, then every move you make in that direction increases the value for both of you, right? This is a small value deal. This is a much higher value deal for both of you. This is as high a value deal you can get for both of you before one of you has to start losing value. Okay, so any of you that landed at 24 and 75, it's not that it's better than any other deal necessarily, but it is the most value either of you could have gotten without decreasing the value of the other person. So I just wanted you to have this concept in your mind. Okay, now I want to hear from you in the last few minutes. So any of you who figured out together that, hey, I'm John, right? I'm okay with more total units, but what I really need is affordable. And Angela said, I'm okay with more affordable, but what I really need is total. I'd like to hear from any of you who had that explicit conversation. Did anyone have the explicit conversation? I will give you more affordable if you will give me more total. Okay, good. You guys did. John, let's hear a little bit. How did that sound? How did it go? What words did you use?
Yeah, thanks. So, well, apparently we broke the rules at the end of the day, but I wasn't aware of that. I'm Angela Redstone. I'm just trying to do a good thing for the community. But I think it felt very earnest, and I just wanted to, because I'm like, I didn't know what John's instructions were, and I wanted to know like what the limits were and what the comfort was. And so it kind of just, I asked progressive questions like, what would you be comfortable with? Like, what are your concerns in this regard? Like, if you're not comfortable with 100, like, would you be comfortable with 90? And so, and kind of reiterated that, like, if we could increase on the number of units, I would be willing to increase on affordability. And I think just trying to communicate in good faith that that was possible for us both to have a beneficial outcome than the baseline.
And was it obvious to you, John? Who was your Angela?
I was Angela.
Oh, sorry.
John.
Oh, sorry. Right. You're Angela doing good for the community. And you're John. Okay. And how did you understand that John really just needed the percentage of affordable or the total number of affordable to go up? How did you guys figure that out? Did you just have an explicit conversation or how did that happen?
Yeah, I think it was pretty straightforward. I asked and I kind of continued to say, like, I can increase the percentage of affordable if we can increase. And then, but I think it was pretty open. Do you want to add a few words on it? No?
And you guys just went back and forth like, well, how about this? How about this? How about this? Kind of like that?
Yeah, kind of like that, but also asking like, what were the real concerns and like, how much would be too much? So kind of asking like, right, if this was too much, we got to a point where I was talking about like 90, like if 90 is too much, like what would you be comfortable with? And they would go back, and John would go back a lot lower on the overall units. And I would say, well, that's way too low. I would have to move back affordability way too much.
Right.
So just kept that target in mind the whole time.
Okay, beautiful. You can just hold that for a second.
Okay.
One thing I want to just note. So that question of if we did this, then what? This is a classic negotiation technique that you should work into your vocabulary. What if we did this? So you're not saying, I want to do this, right? You're not saying, I am demanding of you or even asking of you that we go to 90. You're saying, what if we went to 90? What does that look like for you? And you get a response that gives you information. So you're not saying, I'm going to do 90. You're proposing a thing that says, what if we do this? And then you get some more information. And then you understand, that's actually truly out of the ZOPA, right? Now, they could be lying. That's a whole other class. We can talk about that. But you have to, but you do have to learn to ask some good questions that open up the possibility of understanding what their interests are, right? Okay, I'm going to ask the people online if anyone is game to do this. Actually, I will ask this broadly, but anyone online, I'm going to prioritize you if someone wants to answer this question. I'd like to know how you would apply what you learned in this exercise to the concept of community engagement on climate adaptation. I'll give you all a second to think about it. And if someone online wants to respond, you have the priority. But everyone think about that for yourself. Jackson, do we see anyone online? Raising a hand. Okay. This is it, online folks. It's your chance. Anyone? Okay, no problem. Someone in the room. Would love to hear you try to just articulate what in this exercise helps you sort of think about doing better community engagement around climate adaptation.
Hi, so this is an answer to your question, but also another question to your question. So I found that it was easiest to negotiate when we both knew exactly what each other wanted, without lying. I did lie a couple times, but besides that, towards the end, I was like, you know what, I just want to make a deal. So it was really valuable to know where each other was coming from and know specifically the limits and what we could have as the zone of possible opportunities, alternatives. So what if you do when you can't be that transparent?
That's a great question. I really appreciate it. I just want to echo one thing that you said, because the reason I chose this exercise, I had two reasons for choosing this exercise. One is that it fit in the hour we had. The second is that I think it's really important I cannot figure out where, is this okay? If you can consistently dedicate yourself to the commitment that when you are negotiating, when you are working in the community, that your goal is to actually understand what they need and what they want, right? Then the zone of possible agreement opens up, because you will go to them with constraints. There's no question. And to anyone who considers themselves more of the community than not of the community, and you are negotiating from that perspective, the same is true, of course, right? The more you understand about the constraints of the people that you're working with, the real constraints that they have to contend with, right? But also what they care about the most, then you can do some, and I hesitate to use the word calculation because it isn't that numeric, right? But these are the kinds of things that this community, that this organization, that this government entity really, really needs. And these are the things that I really, really need. Can we trade across these at all? Can I give a little in order to get more of what I actually want, right? There's a give and a get when you're trying to do consensus building. And it sounds obvious. And when you say it, everyone's like, yeah. But then you do an exercise like this and you realize it's really harder than you think it is, partly because you get attached to the things that you want, and then letting go of them feels very painful, right? I'm sure all of you, well, I would imagine all of you went in with a very different number in your head than you were able to land on, because we designed it that way. so you could feel what it feels like to have to let go in order to get, that is part of the deal. And then also to figure out what they could give you that you might have even been afraid to ask for. But once you really understand what they need, you could say, wait a second, they would be happy to give me a lot more time. They would be happy to give me a lot more resources, as long as I am able to give them XYZ, whatever it is. So did I at all answer your question? Oh, how do you find it out? How do you figure it out? Yeah. Okay. So sorry. So probing within what is transparent is like the obvious thing, right? Of course. But a lot of what the issue with transparency is usually a trust issue, right? And so if you feel that either you cannot be as transparent as you would like to be, or you feel that they cannot be as transparent with you as you would like them to be, right? That is a trust building issue. And so your activities and your energies need to be directed to that. And I know that sounds maybe too simplistic, but the reality is that you either negotiate in a lack of trust, and you then have to become a more skilled negotiator around not being able to find the SOPA, or you work on building the trust so that you are able to get into the ZOPA more easily, right? And in these long-term relationships, which most of our relationships are in terms of climate adaptation, trust should be on your side, or at least you should put trust on your side, right? Okay, I think I have to wrap, right? I have to wrap up. Okay, thank you, everyone. That was fun, I hope, and not too stressful. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Carrie. That was really insightful. I've never done a negotiations exercise before. I was John, and at first, in looking at this, I thought I did a bad job as John, but we were right in here. So it's about what we both want. Anyways, I'm here to close us out. My name is Carolyn Norkowitz, and I work for EEA. I work for the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Program. So community engagement is near and dear to our program. It's something we are constantly trying to encourage folks to do better on, and to just really push the envelope of how municipalities are thinking about community engagement. So it was a pleasure to hear from all of our speakers today. Our next forum will be on December 6th, and we'll be talking about finance. So there's a lot of
federal funding opportunities out there right now, but how do you balance them all to create an effective funding strategy? Impact of different funding sources. It'll really be a great coverage of everything financial when it comes to resilience building. Because after all, unfortunately, we can't do it without money. So we hope to see you all there. And thank you again for coming to our forum this morning. Thank you, Gabriella. There are neon slips of paper on your table. That is our survey. It is very short. Please just let us know what you thought of today's forum. And if you have any suggestions for future forums, we as a steering committee are always open and happy to consider your ideas. Think of it as participatory budgeting, if you will, without the budget part. So looking forward to seeing what you all thought about today's forum. Please let us know. Thank you very much and have a great day.